All right, good morning. We're going to do a demo of the Parmesan Pan Fried Kale for the February harvest of the month right now. So just to go over your ingredients, I sent you a recipe that has both the options for servings for 4 side dishes, which is the original recipe, and also for 40 taste test servings. So we're going to be cooking the 4 side dish side just because it's a little smaller right now. So our ingredients were 1 large bunch of kale, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 5 cloves of garlic, salt and pepper to taste, and 3/4 the cup of Parmesan cheese. So I have most of my kale cut up at this point. And the first thing that we're going to want to do is thoroughly rinse the kale in cold water, which I did, soaking if necessary to remove the grit. So you guys can just run it under cold water, get some of that grit off. It should be pretty clean once you get it. Then we're going to chop the kale into bite-sized pieces suitable for kids. So this is where you're going to have to use your judgment a little bit. I like to cut it up in pretty tiny pieces, especially for our serving size cups. But if you've done kale with your kids and they like the big pieces better, feel free to improvise. So I cut up most of the kale, but I did want to leave 1 piece for you here so that you can, I could show you just what we're working with. So this is a smaller piece of kale. I usually just kind of grab the bottom and pull, and then at some point the top breaks off. So just kind of get the leaves away from the stem, and then you can throw away the stem if you want to keep them and make a smoothie out of them. No, just like that. And then you may have to work in bunches or batches. I like to kind of just roll it all into a little ball, and then just start slicing it up into thin pieces, and then I'll go back the other way after that. So I'll kind of rotate it here a little bit and then kind of go through it again. So you get it in those long, thin slivers and then into kind of smaller pieces. So that's kind of what we're working with for the kale. All right, so our next option is we're going to heat the olive oil in the stock pot over medium or high heat. So where we have a pan here, you guys can feel free to use your stock pots for this recipe. You'll be able to fit a lot more kale in there and get a good time to mix it up. None of the kale will be flying out. But since we're just doing a little bit, this is what we're doing. So I'm going to turn on my burner here. And I'm going to put 2 tablespoons of olive oil into our pan. And I'm going to just give that a minute or 2 to get hot. So I chopped our garlic already so that was already done, so you didn't have to watch me chop garlic. So here's all our chopped garlic. The garlic keeps pretty well overnight, so if you want to save yourself some time and chop it and put it in a Tupperware and then just bring it in the next day, you can always throw like a little bit of olive oil on it. And then just decrease the amount of olive oil that you're using in your recipe. So you'll also get some Parmesan cheese in your recipe, and ours calls for 3/4 cup of Parmesan cheese. So again, use your judgment. If your kids really like the cheese, you can add a little bit more. If your kids aren't huge into the cheese or they have issues with how things look, sometimes when the Parmesan cheese gets melty, they think it looks like mold. So that's just something to kind of think about a little. You can choose to either mix it into the whole recipe or just sprinkle some on top. So again, use your judgment, whatever's easiest. Feel free to kind of mess around a little. So we're going to throw our garlic in here and give it a quick stir. You don't want it to get brown because then it starts to burn and taste a little funky. Alright, so then we're going to just throw our kale in. So the kale will shrink down like a lot, so feel free to kind of fill her up, especially if you're using your stock pot. You can definitely fill it up a bunch, and then just keep stirring it. Depending on what's going on with your taste test and how the afternoon is looking, and if you have 1 volunteer or 2 volunteers, you can either put some water in the bottom of the pan, just like a couple tablespoons, and then put the cover on and let it steam. And then you can kind of leave it, just watching it, but leave it a little bit maybe while you plate out the recipe, the batch that you just cooked before. Or you can leave it uncovered and just stir it. So since we're here today doing it like this, I'm going to leave it uncovered, and I'm just going to stir it really well, and you'll see it start to change color. So it'll go from like that dull green to that shiny green. And it's okay if they get a little crispy. I think that's like the fun part of this recipe, is that it's a little pan fried and a little crispier than just kind of like boiled kale or highly steamed kale. So, and you can see that it already shrunk down a bit. So it will hopefully give you enough, and then when you're plating it out, you just remember to kind of, with your tongs or your scooper, give them a good shake when you're really mixing it around in the bowl to cool it, because as it cooks, some of the pieces are going to start to like wilt together a little bit. This one should be a pretty quick one. I know I'm doing a smaller batch, but you'll be doing probably about 3 times as much of this, or you could do less depending on your lunch periods, but it goes pretty quickly to the point where they start to get ready to get cheese. So let them keep cooking. We're in step 3 of your recipe. And then the last thing we're going to do is transfer the kale to a serving bowl and stir in the Parmesan cheese. Alternatively, you can sprinkle the Parmesan over each serving. So for you guys, you have those metal bowls, so I would say transfer the kale to the metal bowls to let it cool a little bit. And then either stir in the Parmesan cheese while it's in the bowl and give it a really good toss with your tongs or your spoon. Or you can plate it out into your little serving cups, and if you have time, sprinkle a little bit of cheese on top of each, but it's probably a little too fancy for what we're working with since you guys don't have a ton of time. But up to you, whatever works best. Okay, so we're just about ready as to what it should look like. Use your judgment again, taste a piece and see. These kids by now, what they like and what they don't like, the textures and the mouthfeel and stuff. So if you think they like it crunchier, feel free to cook it less. If you think they like it more cooked, feel free to cook it more, whatever you feel. So this is starting to get a little crispy on the edges, and it's definitely cooked. So I'm going to shut my heat off. I'm not going to use a serving bowl because we're just right here, but I am going to measure in the cheese. And salt and pepper, excuse me. So definitely pepper. The salt, you can go easy on a little bit. The Parmesan cheese is pretty salty usually, so but a little bit of salt never hurt anybody, and it's good to have for flavor. Alright, so this calls for 3/4 of a cup of Parmesan cheese. This is my 1/4 cup scoop, so, again, eyeball it, see how it goes. And then just give it a quick stir. So you can tell it looks like Parmesan cheese. One of the things that we got feedback from the vendors is that if the Parmesan cheese starts to get really melty, some of the kids start to think that it looks like mold. I don't think that they'll have that issue with you, but something that you could think about is letting it cool a little bit before you put the Parmesan cheese on top so that it doesn't melt. You could also make sure that your container of Parmesan cheese is out on the counter, and that way they can see it. And when they say like, ooh, what's that white stuff? And you say, oh no, it's just the Parmesan cheese that melted, and they can kind of see the cheese, what it looks like in its original form. But that's it. Plate it up. You know, we're thinking your serving cups are about a quarter cup. They're 4 ounces. So I would say, you know, a couple leaves of kale per kid is probably good. You know, but you've been doing this a couple months, so you know what they'll eat and what they won't eat and how much. So that's it. If you have any questions, let us know. Make sure you are watching this video so that we didn't have a chance to do our training session this month. And we wish you the best of luck. And thanks to Maddie for doing our filming.
Hey guys.
Bye.
Bye.